All right, hello, welcome back to Unqualified Analysis. We'll call it a preview edition of Unqualified Analysis. I have got college football playoff coming up here. I have got NFL playoffs coming up here today, and we're just going to get into all that here in just a second. But first and foremost, wherever you're listening to this right now, first off, thank you. Thank you for doing that. But while you're in the area, why not subscribe? Why not share this thing a little bit? Why not help me grow this thing while you're at it? And, if you feel so inclined, why not drop me a follow on the Twitters, at CalebVUA, as I'm just spittling all over the place. What else is new, I guess? I'm just gesticulating wildly and spittling all over the monitor here. But yeah, just drop me a follow at CalebVUA. Link to the Twitters is down in the description. You can also shoot me an email at unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. With that said, though, we're going to do the previews, but first and foremost, let's kind of round out Black Monday, if you will, kind of extend it into Tuesday. Really, it was only the joke organizations that were making moves on Tuesday. So the names here should not be surprising with that caveat. So the Antonio Pierce was not, in fact, safe, it turns out. The Raiders fired him on Tuesday, as I mentioned before. Just wild stuff. To let him even get to the press conference on Monday, like the postseason press conference, just wild in and of itself. And yeah, just it speaks to how much of a joke organization that the Raiders are, pretty much. I mean, that's my big take on this. I know Tom Brady is going to be very involved with the coaching search, all that sort of stuff, but Mark Davis is calling the shots at the end of the day, and Mark Davis does not run a good program. That's pretty clear to see at this point with what has been trending over the last several years. Really, we can just date it all the way back to when he took over for Al Davis after his passing back in the day. And maybe he was doing the operations before that. I don't know. I wasn't really thinking that deeply into the sport before a good couple of years ago. Really, it was before I started doing this podcast. Not too long before I started doing this podcast, though. So, I mean, that's kind of that's the way I see it. Anyways, we'll see. Whoever the Raiders' next head coach is, they still have Tom Telesco as the GM. And really, outside of Justin Herbert, Rashawn Slater, I can't remember if he drafted Joey Bosa or if Joey Bosa was a holdover from the previous administration. But outside of those players, he whiffed on a lot of free agents with the Chargers. He had, not put together a good roster with the Raiders this last year, that you can cut him some slack because it was year one and he took over a bad situation from what Josh McDaniels and I can't even remember who the name of the GM was there. He's not a nobody. He did get a GM job in the NFL, but just a faceless GM that did not put together a good roster. It's just Max Crosby and a bunch of dudes right now. And of course, Brock Bowers, the best tight end in the entire league, that's just trapped on one of the worst teams in the entire league. Just historically, I'm not talking all the way back in the glory years of the 70s, 80s, 90s, where they won a Super Bowl in each decade, I'm fairly certain. I'm talking about what happened after that. Really, after the Tuck Rule game, it's been not great for the Raiders. Not great, with the exception of a few playoff years here and there. I want the Raiders to be good. Let's not get it twisted here. I want the Raiders to be good because when the Raiders are good, it's just good, clean fun in the NFL. It's probably a little bit less fun now that they're not in Oakland anymore. You don't get that Oakland flair, which is disappointing. And I'm with all the people in Oakland for both the A's leaving and the Raiders leaving, for that matter. But yeah, when the Raiders are good, it's just fun. So I want the Raiders to be good. I just don't think they're being run the right way by the people up top, be that Tom Telesco or, more pointedly, Mark Davis. We'll see if the influence of Tom Brady can make a little bit of a difference here. I'm interested to see who they take for their next head coach. I think pretty much every team is in the mix for Mike Vrabel at this point. He's going to have his pick of the litter. I think he's going to end up interviewing for basically every open head coaching job, and he's got the time to do it. Obviously, he took the year off from coaching, obviously not by his own choice, but took the year off of coaching, worked as a consultant for the Cleveland Browns, was a very hands-on consultant from what I understand, so not necessarily taking the year off of coaching, just head coaching, and I think he's better off for that. So he's going to have his pick of the litter. It's just kind of down to, okay, where do you want to go when it's all said and done? Do you want to go back to the Patriots, where you spent the glory years, but right now things aren't going great? Jonathan Kraft has got probably a little bit too much control, but he's going to be the owner eventually anyways. So do you want to step into that situation? Do you want to go to the Raiders? Not a whole lot better on that front. Mark Davis is a pretty decidedly bad owner, and he's going to be there for quite some time still. So that's not looking like a great opportunity. I mean, really, if there's a head coaching opportunity right now, I mean, you can go right down the list. I think there's 5 open head coaching spots. One is the Jets. Need I say more? Patriots, we already went over. The Bears, I mean, they've never had a 4,000-yard passer in their entire existence. So that should tell you just about everything you need to know. They've been skating off the glory years of 1985 for quite some time. And you look at the Raiders, obviously went over that here just momentarily. And then, of course, the Jaguars. That shouldn't even be factored in. I mean, until Trent Baalke gets the hell up out the paint, I would not dive on that grenade if I were any head coaching candidate out there looking for a job in this cycle. That's one that they're going to have to hire a green first-time head coach that's just looking for any old opportunity. Kind of like Dave Canales with the Panthers last year. I'm not saying that Dave Canales was desperate or anything, but it's his first head coaching opportunity. The Buccaneers was his first offensive coordinating opportunity, at the very least in the NFL or at the NFL level. So you're going to have to go after a candidate like that. If you're Jacksonville, you're not going to, You're going to have to get another guy kind of like Doug Peterson, I would say, where Doug Peterson just got fired. The Jaguars, I'm fairly certain, were the only ones that were offering him a head coaching spot. So you're either going to have to go that route, a desperate older head coaching candidate, or you're going to have to go for the less experienced route, a guy that you can kind of bring in, and you'll have to be a little bit patient while there's growing pains going on. But as the Panthers showed this year, that can work out every once in a blue moon. I will say the Panthers, at the very least down the stretch this year, were the exception, not the rule, I would say. In general, shitty teams stay shitty, and there's a reason for that. But I've just completely delineated there. The other joke of a franchise that fired someone, the Titans fired GM Ran Carthon. Just joke of a franchise. Complete and utter joke of a franchise. This is just, I mean, they gave Ran Carthon 2 years. I mean, they basically ran Mike Vrabel out of town because of Ran Carthon and their working relationship together. Just a joke of a franchise. A franchise that's made a bunch of decisions reactionarily, if that's even a word. I sure hope it is, because it make me feel real good about myself, especially today. Your boy needs it today. I won't go into any further detail than that. But I mean, I don't know where the Titans see themselves going. I don't know if they have a real clear vision, quite frankly. Good luck to the next GM that comes in there. I wish the best for you. I hope for all of your success. I don't think that ownership group knows what the hell it's doing, which makes it a perfect landing spot for Aaron Rodgers this offseason. So we'll keep that in mind. If Aaron Rodgers does come back, which I cannot stress enough, he should probably call it quits right now before it gets bad. That's my 2 cents on it. 41-year-old quarterback, going to be 42 next season. I would call it quits now, because this last season was pretty bad. Pretty bad. And, you don't want to go out like Donovan McNabb did. You don't want to go out like a Dante Culpepper. No disrespect to those players. Great players in their primes, but my goodness, that last year that they had in the league was something sad to behold. At the very least, you were serviceable this past year. You weren't very good, Aaron Rodgers. You weren't very good at all. Not mobile anymore. The arm strength, still good, but diminished from what it once was. It's time to step away, and hopefully not into the next administration. I shudder to think of a country where Aaron Rodgers is appointed to a real position where he can make real policy changes. That frightens me if that were to pass. But I do know his buddy, RFK Jr. That is, R.I.P. to RFK Sr. I suppose. I do know his buddy there is going to be running the Department of Health. So maybe he should just play until he's 45. You know, maybe that is actually a better route for the world as a whole. So that could be cool. That could be cool, actually. You know what, Aaron Rodgers? I changed my mind. Go to the Titans. You're going to be there for the next 5 years, maybe even 10 years. We can just stretch this thing out in perpetuity if you'd like. You just bounce around practice squads, keep making money, keep doing your weird hippy-dippy shit on the side. Hey, more power to you. If you just keep on playing football, I think that's good. I think that's good, come to think of it. I completely flip on what I was saying before. That being said, I think I've bloviated enough on those headlines. So let's get into the preview episode, shall we? Let me just get a quick swig of this Coca-Cola here. And we've been over this on the One Thing I Learned This Week segment, but you like that sneaky aftershock burp there that I just kind of snuck in there? A little disgusting, but you got to be impressed with the form on that one. I'm just, let's just address this right now. I'm going to go ahead and do some previews in this episode, okay? This is what this is. This is a preview episode, and by the way, before I go any further, I do have to say, we've been over this before on the One Thing I Learned This Week. I found my train of thought. I apologize for losing it, but I found my train of thought. We've been over this on the One Thing I Learned This Week. That being said, it's worth bringing up here again, closer to the top of the show. There was never any cocaine in Coca-Cola. It was coca. Coca. The coca leaf. It was not refined cocaine. Maybe you could make an argument that it was a compound that was similar because they were mixing it into a drink, but it was not refined cocaine. It was just coca. It was just coca. And like whiskey and syrup, of course. And the first Coca-Cola was wild. It was a wild concoction. I'm kind of interested to taste the original Coke. It probably tastes like horse shit. I mean, it was so the guy who invented it could wean himself off morphine, essentially. That being said, sounds fun. You got an upper in there, you got a downer in there. I mean, it just sounds like a blast to me. I mean, it sounds like your heart's going on a roller coaster, which could be fun. That being said, not cocaine. Not cocaine in Coca-Cola. Coca. There's a reason it's called Coca-Cola, because coca. That's why. That's why right there. Any hoozles, let's get into the preview episode. We'll start off with college football, then work our way over into the NFL, where ultimately we'll be spending most of the episode here. But starting off in college, kind of lightly preview these games last week, but we'll get a little bit more in depth here, or maybe rehash the same points. We'll just see how it goes here, I suppose. But first off, on Thursday, we've got Notre Dame at Penn State. Notre Dame is favored by 1.5, and on this one, I am going to kind of reiterate basically what I just said on the last college football episode here. Notre Dame and Penn State are roughly the same sort of team. They both want to get a lead on you, probably a 2-score lead, and then they want to suffocate you with their defense. They want to let those guys just absolutely eat on the defensive line, let the secondary make plays, and they want to let their run game just grind you into dust on the other side and make you bend to their will. That's what both of these teams want to do at their very core. The difference that I see in this game, and really I am just rehashing everything I said on the previous college football episode, so if you didn't tune in, this is pretty much a copy and paste of what I said the last time. The big difference between these teams is at the quarterback position. Riley Leonard does run better. I'll give him that. He is not a threat as a passer, though. Never has been. At this point, he is what he is. He never will be. This is just who he is at this point. He's a very good runner, but at the same time, as a passer, he's a liability. He doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot, but he doesn't get a whole lot of yards. He doesn't push the ball down the field. He doesn't turn the ball over, let's just say, because he doesn't take a whole lot of risks. And sometimes it doesn't even stop him. He's had some bad games this year. Penn State, while I am not a true believer of Drew Aller, I think Drew Aller is a better player than Riley Leonard is. I think there's one player that's getting some sort of NFL consideration in this game, and there's one player that's not among the quarterbacks, and the one that's is playing for Penn State. The one that's not is playing for Notre Dame. So to me, in this one, and it's the reason why I picked Penn State at plus 1.5, I just feel like there's a clear team that is better suited for this game. And there's so much like gridlock at all levels with how this game is looking like it's shaping out to go. The one advantage, if there is an advantage anywhere between these two teams, that advantage plays out in magnitudes, I would say, just based on the fact that these teams are so similar otherwise. Now, for Notre Dame, what they're going to have to do is what basically no one has been able to do all season. It's get turnovers off of Drew Aller. And if you don't get turnovers, stop the big plays. Your defense is good enough. It's been proven time and time again this postseason and throughout the season against lesser competition, but still throughout the season, your defense is good enough to hang with just about anybody. If you can limit big plays, keep this thing a rock fight, you're going to have a good chance to win this game. I just think Penn State is a little bit better suited for this one. I think they have more of a stable of backs that they can roll with, as opposed to Notre Dame, which is really just the Jeremiah Love show. They are good outside of that, don't get me wrong, but Jeremiah Love is the star of the show. Notre Dame doesn't have a guy like Tyler Warren. They don't have a guy at quarterback like Drew Aller. Let me just wipe that off the screen real quick. I just spittled right on the screen, right on the monitor. It was a little bit disgusting, but what else is new? I mean, Drew Aller, if you can force him into taking what the defense gives him, checking the ball down short tackling to keep him short of the sticks if you can, force him to third down, that's Notre Dame's recipe to win, and that's really always Notre Dame's recipe to win, but particularly in this one, they're going to have to somehow win the quarterback battle, or at the very least force it to a stalemate with the play of their defense. That's how Notre Dame wins this game. I just don't think that they do it in this one. I think Penn State is just a little bit better than Notre Dame, and it's going to bear out in the scoreboard. I think Penn State goes to the national championship game to play the winner of the next game, Ohio State and Texas. This one is at 5.5. Obviously, we're on Ohio State if you listened in last week. This is a simple one right here for me. Think about the two losses that Texas had, both of them to Georgia. And then you think about all of the other teams that Texas has beat this year. I don't see a real impressive win on the schedule so far. Now, the Arizona State game was exciting, but let's not forget that Texas was, I believe, a 2-touchdown favorite going into that game, at the very least a double-digit favorite going into that game. They were expected to win and win comfortably, and they got into an absolute dogfight down the stretch, which, if you watch the game, they should not have been in. Texas was a clearly better roster, a better football team. It's just, to me, it comes down to, obviously, Steve Sarkisian is not blameless in this. I mean, if you see that your quarterback is not performing well, which obviously we'll talk about in just a second. I just gave away, buried the lead on my next point there. But Steve Sarkisian, it falls on him for not managing the game properly and really leaning into the strengths that make you what you are as a football team and make you a national title contender. But I would say the main problem is that Quinn Ewers isn't consistent with who he is all the time. Sometimes Quinn Ewers will come out and he's just throwing darts down the field. He is hitting guys in stride. They're going for long touchdowns, and Texas looks like an unbeatable juggernaut. But there's just this inconsistency where it feels like every so often, and it happens fairly frequently against the really good teams, Quinn Ewers is just throwing balls out there, and it feels like they're prayers. Every single one of them feels like a prayer. It's hard to really put into words how it feels watching Quinn Ewers sometimes, but if you've watched him, you know what I'm talking about here. There are times where he's not the pro prospect that he's purported to be at times. Now, he's obviously a very physically talented guy, one of the highest rated recruits of all time, specifically at the quarterback position. He's an incredibly highly rated recruit coming out of high school. But that doesn't really translate to what I'm seeing on tape. He didn't live up to the 5-star billing. I'll just say that. He's obviously the starting quarterback at Texas. He's obviously very good. He's going to get drafted if he decides to come out in this year's draft, though. He might just want to stay one more year and chase a national title elsewhere. That's his decision to make. But it just doesn't feel like that guy can win you a championship. And On the other side, Texas, the defense is good. Obviously, the front seven has been dominant at times, but it suffers from kind of the same inconsistency that we see from the offense, where they got these players up and down the roster, but then the front seven ends up getting just bodied by Cam Skattebo. And no disrespect to Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo is like running without an offensive line, essentially, though, and you basically let one man beat you. Now, that is one incredible player, but at the same time, with the advantages that Texas had on the front seven, it should have never been an issue. There should have been multiple guys to the ball. Cam Skattebo should not have had an opportunity to escape the number of times that he ultimately escaped from those piles. You knew who the guy was coming in, and ultimately you didn't live up to it. You try to tackle him one-on-one, and that's a losing proposition, even when the offensive line is just getting dominated play after play during stretches of that one. So Texas should have won that game by a whole lot more if they'd have pulled their head out of their asses. Instead, it goes to overtime. They have to convert a 4th and long for a touchdown in order to even get to a position where they could win that game. And then meanwhile, on the other side, you got Ohio State, who has fully realized their potential in this postseason. Offensively, they have the best running back tandem in the entire country between Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. An offensive line that's good enough to get them space. Wide receivers where Emeka Ibuka is clearly the second option at this point. The number one option is clearly 100% Jeremiah Smith, who has the potential to be the number one overall pick in 2 years. I'm going to keep saying that. It's all dependent on the quarterback draft and who's at the top of the draft. But if we're just drafting on need, Jeremiah Smith's going to be, bar none, the best player in the draft in 2 years. Whether that translates to him being the number one overall pick, we'll see. But he is far and away the best player on the board when it gets to that point in a couple of years. And that's before you even talk about the defense. The defense is playing like the best defense in the country. They are the best defense in the country right now. Caleb Downs, the best safety in the country, maybe the best defensive player in the entire country. He is incredible. Outside of him, you got Jack Sawyer, who came back for one more year to win a title. JT Tuimoloau, who came back for the same reason. Just studs up and down the roster on both sides of the ball, to a point where, especially if Will Howard just feeds the ball, doesn't really have to do anything crazy. He just got to feed the ball to Jeremiah Smith. This game shouldn't be close. That's why I'm taking Ohio State, because if they just, funnel the passing game through Jeremiah Smith and lean on the running game when they can, this game should never be close. It really shouldn't. And I think Ohio State takes care of business here, quite frankly. Now, the one wild card here is obviously, we've seen, incredible peaks from Quinn Ewers. We saw it last year in the postseason, in fact, with Quinn Ewers just kind of going out of his mind in the college football playoff semifinals there when it was the 4-team playoff. The good old days, as I'll call it here. So Quinn Ewers can get hot. Golden, that guy on the outside who was just tearing people up, if he can do what he did last week against Arizona State, we're cooking with gas, folks. We are cooking with gas. If those two can get hot, and I'm talking, we need a big-time performance, similar to last week, maybe even more so from Golden, clear up some space for Quintravian Wisner and that backfield, get the offensive line humming a little bit. That's the wild card here that could keep Texas close and ultimately put them in a position to win this game. I just don't think Ohio State lets it happen. I think defensively, I think they're going to get pressure on Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers does not handle pressure very well. I don't think he's going to hold up to the pressure that Ohio State puts on him, and I just don't think Texas's defense has got the horses to stay with Ohio State. So I think Ohio State wins. I think they win comfortably, and that's why we're taking them, -5.5. So with that said, let's bump our way over here to the NFL. I'm going to take one more swig of this Coca-Cola. Okay. So we'll just take this thing chronologically here, folks. It's going to sound biased with which game is the last, but I don't control that my team plays the last game of the week on the first round of the playoffs. That ain't my fault. That ain't my fault. That ain't my problem. Anyways, let's just take this thing chronologically. First and foremost, we have got the Chargers at the Texans. Chargers are a 3-point favorite in this one. Over-under is 42.5, at least according to ESPN. I'm sure there's other lines out there. I feel pretty good about the Chargers in this game, and let me just kind of explain why. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll explain it through the lens of the Texans here, I would say. Defensively, they've been solid. We'll give them credit where it's due. The Texans have been all right defensively. They've not been great though. On that same note, they've not been one of those vaunted defenses in the league this year. No, I don't think anyone would say that, but they've been good. They've been good. Offensively though, you've got a bad offensive line. That doesn't perform well against good defensive competition, which they'll face this week against the Chargers. The Chargers have been exposed at times, but they're still a solid defense with really good coaching in Jesse Minter and his staff over there. You're facing up against a solid defense there. It's going to stop the run. They've been pretty proficient at stopping the run. Passing game-wise, you do have C.J. Stroud, so that is a saving grace. But Bobby Slowick is just... he's dead in the water as the offensive coordinator. I don't see how the Texans roll into next year with Bobby Slowick as the offensive coordinator, because even with the deficiencies on the offensive line, with Nico Collins going out with injury, obviously Tank Dell had a gruesome injury a couple weeks back. Even with all of that said, Nico Collins is still back in the lineup there. You do have Dalton Schultz. You've got a good receiving core outside of that. Xavier Hutchinson's kind of low-key been pretty solid throughout the course of, the last couple of years, really. It's just... They just can't put it all together. That Bobby Slowick should be getting more out of this offense based on the personnel. The personnel is not as bad as this offense has been, especially with C.J. Stroud in there as quarterback. And that going up against the Chargers, I just don't like it. And on the other side of the ball, I like the Texans' defense, but I think the Chargers are going to have their number defensively against the Texans' offense. And I think ultimately the Chargers are just going to pound them, and then Justin Herbert's going to hit Quentin Johnston down the field for a 40-yard play. He's going to hit Ladd McConkey for a touchdown or two. He's going to dice you up in spurts, and then let J.K. Dobbins in the running game just grind you into the dust from there. I think the Chargers win this game. I feel pretty favorably about that 3.5 for the Chargers as well. I'm hesitant to do that with a road playoff game, but I trust that Jim Harbaugh will have this team ready. He's one of the best coaches in all of football, regardless of the level, be it college, NFL. He's an elite coach, and he has been dynamite in these situations. So I have faith in Jim Harbaugh to win that game. Let's just kind of put that on the back burner as far as whether that's a pick or not. So let's keep that to the side. Let's get a quick time check, actually. So I have 28 minutes in. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Okay, so next one we got coming up. I am not doing this game. I'm not picking this game. By the way, I just made a quick spur of the moment decision. I'm taking Chargers -3. Sorry about that. I made a weird noise there. I'm looking at headlines. Just Jaguars requesting an interview from Brian Flores for their head coaching spot. Oh, buddy, don't go there, Brian. Don't do it. Don't do it. You fit the profile of what they're looking for, but don't do it, Brian. Don't do it. You don't want this. You don't want this. That being said, yeah, picking the Chargers -3. We'll add it after this. We'll obviously find the best line, but for the purposes of the show, we're doing -3 here. Steelers at the Ravens. Ravens are a 9.5-point favorite. I think that's an appropriate line. I'm staying away from it, though, because it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a year, and it's obviously hard to dominate in that third matchup, especially in the playoffs. So, logically, you think about this, I mean, the Ravens should blow them out. Offensively, I think they match up very well with the secondary. Obviously, the Ravens that have had a whole lot of success in the passing game this year with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's been ultra efficient, and the Steelers have wilted over the last 4 weeks. They're on quite a skid here against really all playoff competition. And the Ravens are not just a playoff team. They're a championship contender. Make no mistake about it. So that's why I would very heavily lean towards the Ravens. Defensively, even, I should definitely talk about the defense. I mean, Zach Orr's got the boys playing at this point. They're playing some good football on the defensive side. And the Steelers' offense, I don't think it's very hard to stop Russell Wilson, especially when the one really solid receiver that Russell Wilson has is an absolute head case in George Pickens. You don't know what you're getting from him on a given week. Mentally, doesn't seem like he's, mature at all, really. And then Ravens defensively, they don't have one elite pass rusher, but they got a bunch of dudes that can get pressure. They're still getting solid pressure on the quarterback there. I think Russell Wilson's going to turn the ball over, and I think it's just not going to be good for the Ravens here when we get right down to brass taxes on this matchup. But like I said, I'm staying away from it just because Mike Tomlin's a hell of a coach, man. You don't get 18 straight winning seasons by not being a hell of a coach. So in a third matchup of the season with a very familiar opponent, I can't discount the possibility that Mike Tomlin's got something up his sleeve, and especially as a road underdog in the playoffs. This just feels like a Mike Tomlin spot. I don't know if the Steelers win, but I think they have a better chance than people give them credit for of keeping this thing much closer than people would expect, especially the people over in the desert in Vegas. That being said, I am picking the Ravens to win. Whether they cover or they don't, I expect the Ravens to win this game and move on to the divisional round. So we move from Saturday to Sunday here. Let's talk about Broncos-Bills. So the Bills are favored by 8.5 here against the Broncos. Let me just kind of lay it out for you here. So obviously the Bills' vaunted offense. You got Josh Allen. You got a good offensive line, good running game, a running back that's really kind of emerged in James Cook. Not a crazy amount of yards, but he sat out a bunch of fourth quarters. 16 touchdowns. That's what you need to be focusing on there. And that's just on the ground. That's not counting the touchdowns that he's caught this year. I think he's probably caught one or two of those. So he's had a monster year. Keon Coleman's had a solid rookie year. Khalil Shakir's really emerged in this offense. Josh Allen's having an MVP season. And you're going against the Broncos defense that at times has gotten exposed. Riley Moss has been victimized at times. In many cases, white-on-white crime. It would certainly be white-on-white crime in this matchup with Josh Allen just milk-checking him at every opportunity. That could certainly happen. I think the Broncos defense could match up well with them, though. They've had a tough time at times kind of staying with elite competition. And I think the fact that Bo Nix is in his first playoff game is a bit of a detriment. You're going to have some degree of growing pains there, but that doesn't have anything to do with the defense. I don't know why I brought that up so quickly. But I think the Broncos, they've been good on defense all year. So I think they have a good shot of kind of making this an interesting game. The Bills have shown at times that they can lay some eggs. Even with everyone playing, they can lay some eggs on both sides of the ball. So I won't count the Broncos out. They're a well-coached football team, good roster. All around. Sean Payton's doing a really good job there. I think Sean Payton probably has the coaching edge over Sean McDermott in this game. A matchup of Sean's. Who would have thought about it? Who would have thought about that in one bit? But you think on the other side of the ball here, the Bills defense versus the Broncos offense. I think Sean McDermott is going to dial up the pressure on this one. I think that he's going to force Bo Nix to beat him with one-on-ones on the outside. I think that's going to be the bread and butter of the game plan here, is to just kind of take advantage of the inexperience, especially in playoff settings. You know, just wow him with intimidation and intensity. I think especially with a rookie quarterback, that's something that you can force him into. He's been very good down the stretch, and he's seemingly gotten better every week to a point where he was the best rookie quarterback. Well, Jaden Daniels notwithstanding. He was the second best rookie quarterback this year. I'll say that much. Sorry, I forgot about Jaden Daniels there for a second. I really do apologize about that. But when you face pressure, especially in the playoffs, and Bo Nix has been pretty hit or miss as far as when he's under pressure this year. A lot of misses, I would say. So I think that's going to be the bread and butter for the Bills. It's just a matter of whether Bo Nix can get the ball out quick, take advantage of one-on-ones on the outside. I think Courtland Sutton's going to be huge in this game because Bo Nix is going to be throwing some prayer balls, and that is Courtland Sutton's specialty. He may be the best jump ball receiver in the entire league right now with his size, with his ability to go up and catch the ball. He's a freak. He's a really, really good athlete. I think he's going to be huge in this game, and you're going to have to take some pressure off the quarterback if you're Sean Payton, and the best way to do that in the long run is by, hitting them on the ground. The Bills have shown at times this year that they can give up some big offensive performances. You saw one early in the season against the Ravens. You saw one against the Rams here a couple weeks back, to where that ultimately put them out of contention for the 1 seed when it was all said and done. Just wasn't quite good enough. Ultimately, when you kind of synthesize this whole thing, though, I think the Bills have the edge here. I just think that lack of experience from Bo Nix is going to win out. It's a heavy lean to the Bills at -8.5. It's just a lot of points for a playoff game, man. I know one or multiple of these games this weekend is going to be blowouts. It's an inevitability. I just don't want to predict a blowout like that in this game. This one could ultimately be a blowout. I think if the Bills execute their game plan defensively and they just relentlessly pressure Bo Nix, I think it will turn out that way. But I'm just not confident enough to pull the trigger on a -8.5. That's pretty rich for my blood. So I will stay away, but we'll take the Bills to win that game. Next one up in the 4:30 slot, we have got the Packers at the Eagles. Philly is favored by 4.5 right now. I don't know. I've not gotten any news. I don't know if Jalen Hurts is clear concussion protocol yet. As of Wednesday during the day, I did not hear anything on whether Jalen Hurts had clear concussion protocol. Let me just see real quick if anything broke during the day, because it was a crazy day. It was a crazy day. I didn't have a whole lot of time to look at these sorts of things. Okay. Let's see what this is. Okay, all right. Sorry about that long silence there. I'll probably cut that out in post because that was pretty awkward. I just had to do some reading there. So he's still not clear concussion protocol at this time, and it's Wednesday. You better clear concussion protocol quick. He was a limited participant in practice. I think this is probably the last hurdle that he has to clear. I think if he wakes up tomorrow with no symptoms, I think he's good to go. I think he clears concussion protocol at that point, at least with my understanding of how the concussion protocol is structured in the NFL. So that's at least good news. If he doesn't clear concussion protocol, though, the Eagles are in trouble. I think Tanner McKee has flashed at times. I think he'd probably be the one to get the start because he's shown much more potential than what Kenny Pickett has shown for sure. That being said, I don't want Tanner McKee to be starting a playoff game for me if I'm the Eagles, especially this Eagles team that is a Super Bowl caliber team. They are a really, really good football team, probably right there, second best team in the NFC, right there nestled behind the Lions, and they are not far behind the Lions, especially with the attrition that the Lions have had on defense. If Jalen Hurts isn't good to go for this game, the Eagles got problems, though, because the Packers, they can get pressure on you. They have got a ball hawk on the back end with Xavier McKinney, who earned All-Pro honors this year. He's been a dynamic guy on the back end. Even without Jair Alexander, they have been very, very solid all year. Jeff Hafley has done a really good job, at least in my mind. Got some areas to work on, but I think they know what they need to work on in the offseason. I don't think it's Jeff Hafley. I think Jeff Hafley's done a fine job over there, much better than Joe Barry did before him. And then offensively, you got to be scared to death of Jordan Love. Absolutely horrified of Jordan Love. If your quarterback can't go and your offensive capability is limited, obviously you're going to have to lean on Saquon Barkley, which they're probably going to end up doing anyways because this is the playoffs, baby. all guardrails are gone. We're riding you till the wheels fall off if we can get us to a Super Bowl and ultimately win that thing. So obviously, if you don't have Jalen Hurts being the main point, even if you are leaning on Saquon Barkley, your offensive capacity is going to be limited in some way, shape, or form. You couple that, it's going to put a lot more pressure on the defense. It's going to put a lot more mileage on the defense throughout this game. And the Packers with Josh Jacobs, they got a physical running game. They've got a passing game that, even without Christian Watson, they're so deep at the receiver position that I don't feel any differently about that passing game. The Eagles have a really good secondary, but the Packers just have a deep stable of solid wide receivers and a quarterback that, hey, we saw it in the last postseason. If he can get hot like that again, even with Jalen Hurts, the Eagles might be in trouble. Without Jalen Hurts, they don't have a prayer if Jordan Love gets hot in this game. That's the big determinant. And you can't bet on this game before you know the status of Jalen Hurts. Without knowing the status of Jalen Hurts, there's no way that you can accurately pick this game. I think if Jalen Hurts is in there, the Eagles win this game. I think if he's not, the Packers win this game. That's how momentous that the health situation for Jalen Hurts is, and I think pretty much everyone feels the same way. So I've got to stay away from it. I've got to stay away from it. But ultimately, if I would like to reiterate, if Jalen Hurts does come back into the lineup, I think we know what the Packers are against Super Bowl caliber teams that are at relatively full strength. At the very least, have their starting quarterback in there. They're not good. I mean, to say they're not good would be harsh, but they've lost all of their games against the meat of their schedule. Just saying, like in the division, they lost the last game to the Bears, which was a little bit embarrassing, but it is what it is. It was a meaningless game, so it didn't really mean anything. But outside of that, they lost both games to the Vikings. They lost both games to the Lions. In especially against the Packers, fairly dominant fashion for the Vikings in that second game. And in the first game, they were dominating for vast portions of it. So if the Eagles are at full strength, I think it's a no-brainer you take the Eagles at -4.5. But you gotta wait on that Jalen Hurts injury situation. That's one that scares me. So for right now, we're steering clear of this game. So we got the Packers and Buccaneers. Jesus, the Commanders and the Buccaneers, not the Packers. Just had Packers in the brain for whatever reason. In the Sunday night slot here, obviously Commanders are on the road at the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield coming into this one red hot. I think he finished third in the league in passing touchdowns with 41. Just diced up defenses this year. Threw a bunch of interceptions with 16, but he was a gunslinger. 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions. I mean, by far the best year of his career in the pros. He's been spectacular throughout this year. Bucky Irving on that side of the ball as well. Just a dynamic running back. Not really, doesn't really have that next gear, doesn't have that breakaway speed, but he's so elusive, so quick at the point of attack that he can break off those big runs, and he's not like a Jahmyr Gibbs sort of burner type when he gets out into space. But he's fast enough to break one off and score long touchdowns. That's not a problem there. He's a really, really good player facing off against the Commanders' defense that has been lackadaisical at times on that front. Now, the Buccaneers' offensive line, it's still a work in progress. It's better than it has been, but it is still a work in progress going forward. So that's something you got to be worried about if you are a Buccaneers fan in this. But Mike Evans on the outside, better than any corner that the Commanders have. Boy, I cannot wait for Marcus Lattimore and him to make up for lost times. That's going to be Marshawn. Marcus Lattimore was a really good college running back whose career got derailed by a terrible knee injury in college. South Carolina, never forget him, Marcus Lattimore. He was a fucking monster. I don't forget you, Marcus. I do not forget you. Marshawn Lattimore, though, and Mike Evans have a long and storied history. I think the last couple of times that they played against each other in divisional play when they were both playing, I think they both got ejected for fighting. Like, these dudes have got deep running beef. Like, there's got to be something off of the field that has occurred between these two that makes them hate each other so much. But that's real deep-seated hate. Those people's grandchildren are going to hate each other. That's what that sort of feud feels like. So I'm looking forward for them making up for lost times. I think since it's a playoff game, Mike Evans is going to keep it in check and just beat the hell out of Marshawn Lattimore just on the whole. Just get him up out the paint and burn him down the field. I think the Buccaneers have a clear offensive advantage versus the Commanders. And no shade to the Commanders. I think they've been way, way better defensively than I thought they would be. And that's even with cutting their first-round pick from last year in Emmanuel Forbes. Defensively, they've picked up some good players. They got Frankie Louvu in there. Obviously, the incumbents like Josh Allen, Jonathan Allen, who I beat in shot put one time, Daron Payne. Some of the young guys stepping up on the outside. Mike Sainer still, rookie, coming out of there from Michigan. He's an animal. I mean, you could tell just from the championship game and the playoff when you got a real good close eye on him when he was at Michigan last year. Just a physical player, a baller, a real baller, a guy that'll come up and hit you, but is also really good in coverage. I like Mike Sainer still, but he is a rookie at the end of the day. I think Baker Mayfield's going to have a lot of holes to exploit. I think the Buccaneers, at the very worst, it is a push with them versus the front seven. The Commanders might have a slight advantage, but I think the Buccaneers could ultimately win on that side of the ball. Defensively, I think the Buccaneers are kind of sitting pretty here. I think they can get really good pressure on Jaden Daniels. I think they can force him off his spots. The running portion of it is the wild card, because if he can break away from you and he gets an alley where he can just burn you, run in a straight line, he's faster than just about anyone in the entire league. He really does have speed that is reminiscent of Lamar Jackson. They're not the same player. Lamar Jackson is a different kind of animal when it comes to the elusiveness that he shows in the open field. But as far as just purely talking about speed, him and Lamar Jackson are on a pretty similar level if you can get them both in the open field. Jaden Daniels is really, really fast. So if you can keep him from breaking off those runs, kind of containing him a little bit, just collapsing the pocket, they'll give you opportunities to do that. So that's where you got to win. I think the Buccaneers secondary, they just lost Jordan Whitehead. He just got in a pretty bad car accident, so bad that he had to get placed on the non-football injury list. So you hope for the best for him, but that's another guy that's missing. They already have some big injury attrition throughout the course of the year. So I could see Jaden Daniels taking advantage of that. He's just got to get the ball out quick is the main thing. I don't really see them getting a whole lot from the running game. I think that really works to the Buccaneers' advantage, but Vita Vea there on the inside with Brian Robinson as your number one running back and a shoddy interior of the offensive line at that, not a recipe for success. I think Vita Vea is just going to make the Commanders' running game live its worst nightmare, essentially, here in this game. And it's going to have to fall on Jaden Daniels to make some plays. He's got the horses to do it. Terry McLaurin is one of the more underrated receivers in the league. He's just consistently got one of the best sets of hands, runs really good routes, just wants it more than the guy across from him is the main thing. Just flat out wants it. He's got other players outside of that. I couldn't think of any off the top of my head. I apologize. But hey, Luke McCaffrey, I don't know if he caught a touchdown this year, but they drafted him pretty highly. Zach Ertz has been playing pretty well down the stretch of this season. Hit some big bonuses there in the final game of the regular season. The running backs they have in the backfield, Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson, not a bad little tandem they got going on there. They just got disadvantages on the offensive line. It's going to fall on Jaden Daniels to win this game for him, though. It's going to come down to that, because I do think, the way I see this game going, and the only thing that can stop them is the randomness of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how they just won't show up. They really didn't show up for the first part of that Saints game last week. The Saints jumped out to, I think, like a 13-0 lead on them. And they were on the ropes for a little bit. They just, turned it on when they needed to and got the win to secure the division. Sorry. I'm highly distracted by my phone here over on the side. I apologize for that. But if they keep their heads from getting dangerously close to the up the ass territory, I think the Buccaneers offense should score a lot of points on the Commanders. There's a reason this over-under is at 50.5, and I think it's because Vegas is expecting the Commanders to hold up their end of the bargain. If push comes to shove and both of these teams are at the height of their powers, I think the Buccaneers will clearly win this game. The Buccaneers' high is much higher than the 10-7 record would indicate. They're one of the 2 losses for the Lions this year. People forget. And obviously that was with Chris Godwin, and we've been over this before, but it's worth reiterating whenever this comes up. They beat the Lions when the Lions were at full strength with Aiden Hutchinson and all of those dudes over there. That's how good this Buccaneers team can be. Even without Chris Godwin in there, the emergence of Bucky Irving, Mike Evans just being the most consistent wide receiver, maybe in NFL history if you just talk about the longevity of his career, the 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons. I think they should have their way with the Commanders' defense in this matchup, especially with the experience advantage with Baker Mayfield. You might have to make up for some coaching deficiencies with Todd Bowles, but Dan Quinn isn't a whole lot better when it comes to that as well. So I like the Buccaneers in this game. I don't know if I feel strong enough to bet the Buccaneers, frankly. But it's a strong lean to the Buccaneers at -3 in this one. The over-under is just too high. I'm staying away from that. And I'm just, general rule of thumb, I'm staying away from over-unders, especially in the playoffs. It can get a little bit weird. So just staying away from those, sticking to the spreads as much as I can. And as we get a time check here, this seems like a good place to end off. Vikings are at the Rams on Monday Night Football to finish out the first week of the NFL playoffs here. The wild card, the super wild card weekend comes to an end in maybe Los Angeles. The backup plan is Arizona because Los Angeles and, well, the surrounding area is currently on fire. Really bad wildfire going on right now. People are losing their homes. People are losing their lives. It's really bad. It is really, really bad over in that area. So obviously the contingency plan is to play this game in Glendale at the Cardinals Stadium. Always a good option. Always a good option. This time of year. Just given the history of the Cardinals and making the playoffs. But that's available down south if in fact it does go that way. I don't know. Unless they get it under control quick, I might expect them to actually go that route. If for no other reason than the air quality is going to be god-awful in LA. Even if there's not an evacuation order, it's probably a better call to just go down to Glendale. I know you want to have a home game, but if people's safety is in jeopardy, if the player's health is in jeopardy with that air quality, it's probably better to just move the game. So that's one thing to watch. But as far as the game itself goes here, so I guess we'll start off with the Rams. Offensively, they scare me to death. I mean, absolutely scare me to death. They've been inconsistent at times. Let's not get it twisted here. The offensive line, just due to the health situation and the fact that they only all got healthy recently, they've been clunky in the running game at times. They've been good, but not consistent in the running game. They're getting better week by week, which horrifies me. And they have Kyren Williams, who's an absolute star, despite kind of a pedestrian yards per carry number, we'll call it. But then you look on the outside. I mean, Tyler Higbee's a rock-solid tight end. Cooper Kupp, maybe not what he once was, but still a damn good wide receiver. Puka Nacua is already an elite wide receiver. He's taken over the mantle as the number one wide receiver, and he's just ran with it. And then you got Matt Stafford at quarterback, who's a Super Bowl winner. Sean McVay as the offensive coordinator, head coach, against a Vikings defense that has not been good against the pass throughout the course of the year, giving up a whole lot of yards against the pass. I think there's a real recipe for the Rams to come out here and put on a show against this Vikings defense. I think running game wise, I think the Vikings will ultimately win that matchup. They've been a very good running defense all year, and I think that continues in this one. So I think Kyren Williams is going to get bottled up in this game. But man, I don't know how much I trust the Vikings secondary against this Rams offense with what they've got coming out here. Got to get turnovers. That's the main thing for the Vikings in this one. Offensive or defensively, you got to kind of play it like you did last week against the Lions and just hope that the offense holds up their end of the bargain. I don't think the Rams are as good of a defense. We'll talk about it here in just a second. But all you can do is just the best that you can. And if you perform like you did last week against the Lions, I don't care that they gave up 31 points. That's because they got tired, because the offense wasn't holding up their end of the bargain. That's the real reason for that. You look at 3/4 of that game, the Vikings defense played out of their minds. Andrew Van Ginkel's a monster. I think Harrison Smith got an interception in the game as well. They created turnovers. Ivan Pace got that one big turnover that got us right down to the goal line, and the offense didn't get him shit, as is tradition. It would turn out. They played very, very well last week. They caused havoc. If they can do that against this Rams offense, I think it should be fine. May ultimately be a rock fight, but it should be fine. The part that really worries me about this matchup for the Vikings here specifically is that the Rams just got the blueprint last week. I don't think the matchups necessarily matter as much. I think the Vikings clearly have matchup advantages on the outside. I think the offensive line has an advantage against the defensive line for the Rams. I think if you look on paper here at the personnel, just the stable of backs that the Vikings have, especially with the emergence of Cam Akers. I would like to have Cam Akers in Minnesota for quite some time. I like him. He can't get rid of us. This is a sign that we should keep him around for as long as he's good. But yeah, I mean, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, what are we talking about here? No one can really stay in front of that group of receivers on a good day here. So just on paper, the Vikings have a clear personnel advantage against the Rams defense. But like I just said, the Rams just got the blueprint last week. I don't care that you're personnel deficient on the defensive side of the ball. You know who else was? The Lions last week. And you know what they did? They absolutely stoned the Vikings. And how did they do it, you may ask? They blitzed the ever-loving shit out of Sam Darnold and just lived with one-on-one on the outside. Doesn't matter, because we know if we can get pressure in Sam Darnold's face, he's going to make bad throws and bad decisions. I just think the Rams saw that blueprint last week, and I think it's a blueprint that's going to transfer into this upcoming week. Now, I don't remember. I think it's Shula. I think Shula's the defensive coordinator for the Rams. It's either Shula or Sorensen. I can't remember which one is for the Rams and which one's for the 49ers. 49ers just fired their defensive coordinator, by the way. So, you know, Black Week continues. Odd way to put that. But, yeah, the week of firings continues. Probably a better way to word that point there. But, yeah, the defensive coordinator for the Rams, not as good as Aaron Glenn. I'm not going to besmirch the good name of Aaron Glenn by saying that. Aaron Glenn's one of the best defensive coordinators in the entire league. Love me some Aaron Glenn. Just wish he wasn't coaching for the Detroit Lions, because I think I do hate them now. I think after last week, I have firmly instilled a hate for the Detroit Lions in my heart. So it's good to be back. It's really good to be back. It need a good outlet for some hate on that front. But even without having Aaron Glenn as the defensive coordinator for the Rams, I think you've got the blueprint. I think if you execute the blueprint, I think you can limit the Vikings offensively. And that scares me. There's a reason why the Vikings are only a 1-point favorite. It's because Vegas saw what I just saw last week. The Lions laid out exactly what you need to do to stop this Pro Bowl level quarterback, Sam Darnold. And it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. Don't go against your better judgment here. I know you want to play into coverage with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. Hey, look me in the eyes, man. Just look me in the eyes. You're not winning that matchup anyways. The receivers are too good. If you focus on one area, another area is going to be wide open. And I didn't even mention Jalen Naylor. We go legit 3 deep on the receiving core with really solid receivers. So someone's going to be open if you play for coverage, and if you don't get pressure on Sam Darnold will dice you up. He's done it all throughout the season. There's a reason he is a Pro Bowl quarterback out of the NFC here. So I know it's against your better judgment, but you're just going to have to live with that one-on-one on the outside. Don't get me wrong. The receivers will win. They will win those matchups, so you got to get to Sam Darnold quick. But if you can get consistent, quick pressure on Sam Darnold, You just saw last week what happens. He'll wilt. He'll wilt. They may be able to move the ball between the 20s, but you get down into goal-to-go situations, really just in the red zone. You bow up there. You continue to execute the plan. The Lions just showed you what happens. They can't convert when the chips are stacked against them. And what you got to do if you're the Rams is put the game in the hands of Will Reichard. Will Reichard's confidence, you're going to have to workshop it this offseason. I think that quad injury has really affected him mentally, just because of the history that he's had with that specific quad. He had a season-ending injury at Alabama on that very same quad, and then he went on injured reserve earlier this year because of that very same quad. I think his confidence has been shaken because of that, just because, hey, wouldn't you be afraid to get hurt? I mean, when the livelihood of really just the livelihood of your life, if that makes any sense, rides on that leg, and it just keeps having consistent issues with this same thing. I can understand why he would have a little bit of reticence going in there, but this isn't a time for feelings and feeling sorry for a guy if you're the Rams. This is a time to see clearly a weakness of the other team, the opponent that you're facing. You need to try to exploit that if you can. You have to force third and longs. You have to force them off the field, force them into field goals. Ultimately, even with them kicking indoors, I think it works out for you. Now, Will Reichard is still a very good kicker. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him if he can kind of figure out this mental situation he's got going on, which is a big if. Granted, I'll give you that. But right now, it would behoove the Rams to put the game in the hands of Will Reichard. And honestly, I still think the Vikings win. I think the Rams are going to make it a real barn burner. I think this deserves the final slot of the weekend. I don't think this will be a blowout in either direction. I think that the Rams keep this close. I just ultimately, the internal bias is telling me that the Vikings win. And maybe that's just blind hope. I'm really worried about this game. I've completely flipped on my head as far as expectations for this Vikings team. I thought they had a legit chance of winning the Super Bowl going into last week, and then I saw what Aaron Glenn did to Sam Darnold, and all of a sudden my mind has completely changed on how I feel about them. Doesn't help that they're in the 5 seed as well. So I think the Vikings win, but I'm worried. I'm really, really worried about this team. Just please, Vikings, for the love of God, just help me out. Help me out in this, please, and thank you. Okay, so with that, ooh, I suppressed that sneeze so much that it turned into a cough for a second there. That was weird. Just a little tickle in the old nostrils there. With that said, that's all for this episode, folks. If you enjoyed, go ahead, like, subscribe, rate. If you're listening at this point, you must have enjoyed, unless this is a really epic hate listen or hate watch if you're watching this on YouTube. But if you stuck around this long, go ahead, give me a follow on Twitter. Go ahead and shoot me a DM on Twitter while you're at it. Share the podcast, like the podcast, rate the podcast, whatever you have to do. Just help me grow this thing, get this thing pumping into the algorithm so more people can see what you're seeing right now. That's all I ask from you. That's all I ask. Just be a friend. Just be a friend, tell a friend, as Pat McAfee is so inclined to say. Outside of that, though, you can also shoot me an email through unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. Still have not checked that. I'm going to do that this weekend. That's my promise to you. I'm going to check that email this weekend. Outside of that, though, thank you so much for tuning into Unqualified Analysis. As always, I've got no clue what I'm talking about. But one thing that I learned this week is that the giant ball on the One Times Square building in New York City, you know, the one that drops on New Year's Eve. Everyone knows the iconic ball that drops in Times Square. That thing weighs 12,000 pounds. 6 tons. I don't know. I just kind of thought that it was hollow inside there. Like it didn't weigh all that much. Like it just kind of looked big, but ultimately it didn't have the mass to go with it. No, that thing is 12,000 fucking pounds. boggled my mind whenever I heard that. So I had to pass on this information. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to go edit this thing and then probably just like go straight to bed because it's already almost 9. I will see y'all on the morrow, that being Tuesday, to kind of recap everything that we just saw. And then obviously next Thursday for college football to kind of preview the national title that we got coming up. So I'll talk to y'all then. In the meantime, enjoy this weekend of playoff football. We earn this. We earn this. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all playoffs. No matter the level, it's a beautiful thing. Let's enjoy it. I will talk to y'all on Tuesday to bask in the glory or the sadness with you then. Stay tuned to find out. See ya.